If your heart seeks companionship, then bear with me, as I will do my best here and try not to get burned with this one. Allow me to lazily regale you with my rankings of the companions of Baldur's Gate 3 from ones who deserve devotion and those that suck. I don't think I've ever been so intimidated in making a ranking list, as the relationship to these companions that some players have is concerning, to say the least. So I feel compelled to point out that this is of course my own subjective opinion based on my preferences, as I rank them on a variety of factors from overall likability, character arcs and growth, and impact within the story. Needless to say, there will be heavy spoilers throughout, and as always, if you find yourself enjoying the video, consider subscribing for more rankings. Now, let's have a crack at this. Number 10, Halsin. The fact that I was a good 30 minutes into writing this list before I even realized I had completely forgotten Halsin should tell you everything you need to know about this character. Halsin is the player at the D&D table that makes you jump when they chime in, because for the past hour they've just been silently sitting there and you kinda just forgot they were even present. While he technically has more content and a larger role in the narrative than a few other companions on this list, he ranks last for me because of his complete lack of unrealized potential and unbearable boringness. After Act 2 and the cleansing of the Shadow Curse, he completely runs out of things to contribute both as a character with an interesting personality or perspective and to the overall narrative. The sad part is he mentions this himself, with some of his dialogue in Act 3 and within Baldur's Gate just sort of wondering what he's even doing there, and I can't help but agree. The most utility I got out of Halsin in Act 3 was luckily having him serve as the sacrificial lamb for Orin, in which I was told he was kidnapped and would soon be murdered. When it finally clicked who Orin was even talking about, as I had not interacted with Halsin for a good dozen hours at that point, I just kinda shrugged and continued on my merry way with Act 3 side quests. Considering you get a second, much more endearing and strong druid within the party certainly doesn't help Halsin out either. If he could have been recruited immediately after his rescue from the goblins, with a much larger role to play as a full party member in Act 1, that would have really helped him here, although I maintain some tweaks to his personality should have been done as well anyways. As I wrapped up Act 1 content and he just kinda remained within my camp, unrecruitable and stoically reciting the same dialogue, he actively started to annoy me with his utter lack of involvement on what was going on around him. Apparently Halsin was never intended to be a companion, and it shows, with him only becoming a full party member because the people apparently yearn for some steamy bear sex. I don't get it. While pretty much everyone in Baldur's Gate 3 is thirsty AF, Halsin feels almost desperately so, as he makes creepily forward advances to the player almost immediately. Redundant, boring, underbaked, and underdeveloped Halsin would have been better left in the Grove in Act 1. If I were to replace him in the roster, Alfira is an obvious choice, as a bard companion is missing, but that would of course require some tweaking in the Dark Urge narrative. Otherwise, I would have loved to see Zevlor become a party member, as his history as a Hellrider and role in the plot is much more intriguing to me than Halsin's. It would also remove yet another elf companion and be a direct counter to Minthara for a paladin party member. Overall, Halsin is barely a full character and is literally a large disappointment. Number 9, Minsc. Sorry Matt Mercer, not even your sultry tones could fully save Minsc. I actually love Minsc and Boo, both for their connection and nostalgia scoring for the series, but as a hilarious and irreverent duo. Dumb and boisterous characters can be tricky to nail, but Minsc treads that line really well within the game, creating some of the most entertaining interactions within all of Act 3. All that being said, Minsc ranks so low because we simply just don't get enough of him, as he is recruited extremely late within the plot and has little to contribute to it overall. More of a cameo than a companion, while his inclusion is a nice touch and nod to previous titles, he lacks the fully developed and fleshed out depth of pretty much every other party member. It's a shame, because while he is a fantastic character, I'm one who likes to stick with the same characters in party makeup to experience their full story and interactions with the world and each other. So by the time Minsc rolls around, I'm pretty heavily entrenched with my current party, and swapping one of them out for him just doesn't quite feel right. That being said, Minsc has some fantastic interactions with Jaheira and even input into later questlines in Act 3, but really lacks a solid questline or character arc for himself of any kind. While their inclusion is a lot of fun for fans of the series, Minsc and Boo feel a little wasted in the grand scheme of the game. Number 8, Will. I was willing to give Will a chance, as initially I found him kind of endearing and interesting. He has a fantastic entrance in the game, heroically leaping into battle with a cheesy one-liner to put the fear into the hearts of the goblins attacking the Grove. And as you continue to interact with him, you realize just how heroic and selfless this man really might be. Almost, and for me especially, to a fault. On paper, Will has some fantastic potential for many interesting interactions and perspectives on events. A tortured hero who sacrificed his soul to protect the land he loved, loves, one who strives to do his best to live up to his father's legacy. Plenty of intrigue and plenty of opportunities for growth, but for some reason I found his every reaction to events increasingly underwhelming. He simply brushes off his quest to kill Karlach so quickly that it almost makes him look kinda stupid and foolish. I get he was misled, but the speed in which he drops this quest he was so adamant on is pretty funny to me. His reaction to having his flesh seared into an actual devilish form is to just kinda shrug and crack some jokes, and this feels barely explored in how NPCs react as well. And he really doesn't seem that invested in even rescuing his own father. There's this almost constant thread with Will that makes him feel superficially involved in what's happening around him, as we're explicitly told rather than shown most of his development and personality. He's just too safe and too good in too many circumstances, despite what he's been through. And while I don't need every companion to be a morally gray, ambiguously good person, I do need something more than just a borderline self-righteous paragon that barely has a character arc. There might be one there, honestly, and maybe I just didn't give Will enough time, but the reason for that is, more than anything, I just find him painfully boring, and what should be a character with a more compelling personal dilemma than most others in the game. In this way, I actually think Will does make for an excellent origin character playthrough, with enough flavor and backstory entwined throughout, yet still allowing you the freedom to somewhat shape his character as you'd like, although staying classed as a warlock makes by far the most sense for him. I also find it hilarious that he calls his pact his proudest moment, when it clearly contains several loopholes that only serve to kind of screw him over. Will, I am disappointed in you. Number 7, Jaheira. And already we're at the point where the rankings get extremely difficult, as each remaining companion is just awesome and incredibly compelling in their own right, including everyone's favorite camp mom, Jaheira. Pulling off an elderly, seasoned character can be a challenge, but Jaheira is integrated and realized just so well within the world of Baldur's Gate 3 that I can't help but love her. In a party of, let's be honest, mostly foolhardy shitheads, the wizened and measured hand of Jaheira is a very welcome one. Being a returning character, there's a lot of history tied into her interactions, and it's just so awesome to see firsthand how experienced and connected this older druid actually is. As I said before, Jaheira for me makes Halsin completely redundant, and her contributions and unique interactions, especially within Act 3 and Baldur's Gate, make her an amazing companion to have in the party. I've yet to do a full Dark Urge run with Jaheira active in the party, but apparently there's some great scenes where she helps you resist the urge, and it's definitely on my list of needed playthroughs. Like Will, Jaheira is a pretty unapologetically good character defined by her kindness, but unyielding when it comes to doing what she knows is right. And unlike Will, I find it so much better executed here with her. Fittingly, there's a wisdom in how she helps the player navigate the world that is missing with other companions. The only real reason I rank Jaheira lower than others is once again the lateness in which she actually becomes a full party member and the lack of a meaningful character arc for her. For better or worse, Jaheira feels like a character that has almost fully developed, and so there's really not much more to explore there with her. Even still, she is an amazing addition to the roster. Number 6, Gale. Everyone's favorite magic item glutton, Gale is a very complicated character for me to rank, as equal parts of me hate and love this charismatic wizard. While every companion has a pretty in-depth and complex backstory, Gale's is just so over the top I kind of find it hilarious. He's the guy who rolls into the first session of a D&D campaign as a character with a backstory so extravagant that you have to remind him, you know, we're supposed to be level 1, right? Why yes, I'm a full archmage and magical prodigy, so skilled with the weave that I was personally chosen by Mystra herself, and of course I'm so charming and handsome that I became lovers with the actual goddess and casually know Elminster. Oh, and by the way, I have the power to turn into a nuclear bomb, killing the party and everyone around me for miles and miles. It's just a lot. Gale is equal parts endearing and exhausting, as his intellect leads him to some very conceited comments while still acknowledging the predicament he's found himself in and displaying at times some pointed humility. Even if I may get annoyed at times, I can't deny that Gale is consistently entertaining to have within the party, as he has moments of vulnerability and humor that shine brilliantly within the game and when interacting with other characters. I particularly enjoy Gale's observations and party interactions as you explore the world, and at times it definitely feels like he should have a much higher charisma score than 12. While realistically he would probably be more of a liability to the party than an asset, considering he can easily wipe everyone off the face of Faerun if one thing goes wrong, it's still hard not to enjoy his role in the party dynamics. A wizard companion was a great call, as well as the versatility and power provided by one is hard to beat, especially at higher levels. While I initially found his romantic advances a bit cringy, I think that sort of fits given the person that he is, and his overall cheerful and friendly nature is hard to hate for too long. Gale is a fantastic addition to the companion lineup, lineup, however he has just enough quirks to keep him from ranking higher than the remaining characters for me. Number 5, Astarion. I'm not going to lie, my entire first playthrough experience with Astarion ended with my Dragonborn Barbarian almost immediately ramming a stake through his heart. I do try to roleplay my character as much as possible, and where I was already pissed at him for putting a blade to my throat at our first meeting, waking up with his vampire fangs bearing over my neck was the last straw. As I continued, however, I began to feel like I had missed out on something great, and I absolutely had. Astarion is fairly off-putting initially, carried almost entirely by the incredible work of his voice actor. This pompous rogue could easily be seen as annoying at first. However, as you discover and explore his character, you are rewarded with one of the best written companion questlines and arcs within the entire game. Astarion's tragic story of abuse and trauma and his desire to either continue that cycle of pain or break it depending on how the player shapes his decisions is unbelievably well executed. Despite being hilarious in general as you progress through the story, Astarion is absolutely one of the more depressing characters in Baldur's Gate 3, and if you give him what he thinks he wants, you'll realize just how broken this person actually is. At least that was my perspective. I always love having an evil companion available, and Astarion fits the bill nicely, even approving of actions that in my opinion don't even fully make sense for him to approve of, other than he just enjoys watching you be an asshole. While I'm not fully focusing on the companion's class or ability, as those things are easily changed, having a rogue in the party is extremely handy, as his high skills and single target damage make him almost invaluable in certain circumstances. Having Astarion be a vampire spawn was a brilliant choice, and after experiencing his full narrative, his unbelieving chuckle at himself for also being infected with a mind flayer parasite is equal parts sad and funny. Astarion definitely feels like a fan favorite even among the developers, having arguably the most polished and fleshed out payoff and development within the entire game. It honestly just makes me wish that other characters could have had the same level of payoff and attention to detail, but I'm glad we got it with this one. Despite what he is, Astarion definitely does not suck. Number 4, Minthara, my beloved Dark Queen.
Oh my God. Charlie, I might be in love with this woman. Not for the right reasons, mind you.
Sure, there's a lot I can say about why I love Minthara as a character, but we know why she's this high. This brutal and cruel paladin is one of my favorite characters within the entire game. On the face of it, Minthara has a lot going against her. She's unapologetically evil, she's difficult and possibly nonsensical to recruit, and she's an extreme and intense zealot, especially when fully devoted to the Absolute's will. Despite all of this, I can't help but be drawn to this incredibly well-written and compelling character. Her voice acting is some of my favorite within the entire game, exuding this pure confidence and authority that reinforces her cruel yet somehow mysteriously charming nature. Due to her circumstances and unfamiliarity with surface races, Minthara has this extremely inquisitive and curious attitude towards many events within Act 3, leading to some hilarious voice lines and moments. It's no secret that Drow are my favorite race within the game, and really all of D&D, and Minthara represents their ideals and racial traits perfectly. She is a cold-blooded killer to the core, and is one of the first villainous characters you meet that portrays a menace and confidence not seen with the goblins in Act 1. Prior to a patch that allowed you to recruit Minthara without purging the grove and siding with the goblins, she was pretty much locked into an evil playthrough, as no good character would willingly side with the goblins in that initial conflict. As such, she can feel a bit strange in a good aligned party, as there's little reason to keep the zealot in your camp unless you agreed with her methods. Granted, she was at the time infected and heavily influenced by the Absolute's will, but she is still a loath sworn drow, and they really aren't into the whole lawful good alignment thing. The non-lethal good method to recruit Minthara is pretty involved and really doesn't make a ton of sense, considering in every other circumstance you readily slaughter any and all who worship the Absolute. So why would you bother? Saving this one particularly cruel acolyte isn't really clear, other than, well, she's hot. Which, okay, that's reason enough. But if you love a darker narrative and heavily morally and literally gray characters, then Minthara provides some of the absolute best interactions within the game. Her romance is also extremely unique and requires some finessing by the player to fully realize, outside of a single insane lust and domination fueled scene that makes killing the druids more than well worth it. I think I have issues. Number 3, Shadowheart. It's pretty obvious in my mind that Shadowheart was up there with Astarion as the most loved and developed character by Larian Studios. Shadowheart features one of the most fully realized character arcs within the game, and the player's ability to shape her journey, resulting in vastly different outcomes, is pretty much unmatched when it comes to any other RPG. Let's be honest, Shadowheart was scientifically designed to appeal in pretty much every way to a very common demographic that would play an RPG like this. She's a hot goth half-elf with a lovely voice and dark mysterious past. She is the ultimate I can fix her girl, and the fact that you actually can fix her is pretty amazing. Beyond her obvious desirable traits, Shadowheart has an extremely involved and layered past that makes revelations around her really interesting to watch unfold. While it was fairly obvious to me early on what had happened with her backstory and Shar, watching her discover and choose to fully devote or reject this dark god is very satisfying. Despite her apparent devotion to Shar, there are hints fairly early on that she has more doubts than she lets on, and her zealotry is basically her overcompensating. Deep down, she seems to know that something is wrong with her worship of Shar, but because of her brainwashing, considers this a liability and a weakness to be purged more than her true good self fighting back. Her duality makes her one of the most interesting companions within the game, on top of her extremely sarcastic and sharp-witted humor. The trust and companionship you can build with Shadowheart definitely feels earned, as she takes a little bit longer than others to truly open up, and at the same time expresses how difficult that is for her. Likely because of her depth and attention by the developers, Shadowheart has what many would consider the best romance path within the entire game, as you slowly see her walls drop during your adventure together. Did I mention she's a hot goth half-elf? It also helps that clerics are incredibly powerful within Baldur's Gate 3, and after respecking her from the completely useless trickery domain, she became a staple within my party, not only for her wit and contributions, but her power within combat. Don't play games with my heart, you know you love Shadowheart. Number 2, Karlach. This might be ironically a hot take, as I actually see quite a bit of dislike for Karlach in certain circles online. However, where I said Shadowheart was scientifically designed to appeal to a particular demographic, Karlach is that for me, because she is absolutely smoking hot. A later addition in development to the party lineup, Karlach is straight up one of my favorite companions in a video game, period. I do get the complaints about her. It seems like the devs were absolutely intent on making her the most funny and likable companion within the game, and despite the obviousness of that, in my opinion they were largely successful. Maybe I'm just basic, but I love a foul-mouthed, larger-than-life barbarian who just loves a good fight. I would agree there is a bit of disconnect between the war-hardened soldier we are told she is and the cheerful, bubbly character that we see, but I think that's kind of the point with Karlach. She just loves life and is embracing her every moment out of Avernus to its fullest. She is an extremely Dungeons and Dragons character, someone who is there to just roll some dice, crack some jokes and some skulls, and have a grand time. And I think it's kind of awesome in a game with so many varieties of characters. Maybe for some she's not necessarily as grounded or in-depth as others, but I found myself very moved by Karlach's journey and its lack of true resolution. Her speech after finally ending Gortash is one of my favorite moments within the entire game, and I found myself actually emotional with her journey and acceptance of what was to come next. Her uplifting, joyful, and optimistic outlook, even with her tragic circumstances and story, is infectious to me. She's just a nice, refreshing change of pace compared to the other slightly more dour companions. Visually, she is by far my favorite companion as well, with tons of little details that communicate what she's been through. The flames flickering across her form, the heat radiating from her infernal engine, the character and personality of Karlach is communicated just so incredibly well at every level. Once again, it helps that Karlach is an absolute monster in combat, with her amped up soul coin rage and abilities helping her rip and tear through the battlefield until it is done. Her screams of fury and impactful animations and attacks made her another staple in my initial playthrough, and I'm pretty sure she almost soloed the entire goblin camp by herself for me. Karlach's romance path is also extremely satisfying as you find ways around her burning condition to uncover an extremely lonely, horny, and desperate person. An absolute badass of a character, Karlach is just fire. Number 1, Lae'zel. My froggy queen Bazel is my favorite companion within the entire game, and again, one of my favorite companions within an RPG of all time. Lae'zel is just so insanely layered that those who haven't taken the time to journey with her and uncover her character are sorely missing out. I get why a lot of people bounced off Lae'zel hard and didn't really bother. For quite a while through Act 1, she is by far the most abrasive, demeaning, and unlikable character within the entire party. She displays plenty of racial supremacy and disdain for pretty much every other party member and race, bluntly telling others exactly exactly what she thinks and the foolishness of pursuing any other solution than her own. She is incredibly stubborn and aggressive, and yet somehow I completely fell in love with this character. Her journey through the game is just amazing. Going from a truly hardcore believer in Vlaakith and her desires for her people, to facing and admitting undeniable yet extremely painful truths about herself and the very nature of her entire existence. I was just completely entranced watching her change, learn, and grow, and it felt like a maturity and subtlety was being shown through this character that is a rare sight in video games. Lae'zel's internal conflict and final reckoning with Vlaakith is a very satisfying and compelling character arc, and outside of the character traits and effectiveness in combat, this is what makes her the best companion for me. Lae'zel also has the largest and most integral contributions and impact to the overall narrative, making her an obvious choice for permanent party member. Much like Shadowheart, the player has a large role to play in shaping Lae'zel's journey and can almost completely change her as a person, with a romance and certain decisions resulting in one of my favorite TAV endings within the entire game. Traveling the stars on dragons with my hot frog girlfriend to overthrow an evil despotic goddess is the stuff that dreams and epic sequels are made of. Being able to see and experience the journey of this unyielding warrior to something far greater is why I love Baldur's Gate 3 as an RPG and an overall narrative. It also helps that I think she also has one of the coolest character designs within the game and is acted by an insanely talented voice actor. Just an incredibly well done and awesome companion. And there you have it. Every companion within Baldur's Gate 3 highly subjectively ranked. Let me know in the comments who your favorite or least favorite companion is and what you might hate or love about my own list. If you enjoyed, once again like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.